everybody, KleverKrok back for another viability analysis video. This time we are going to be talking about Pelipper, and you guys might be wondering, Pelipper, really? I mean, that's okay, weird that you would pick something like that. This is Gen 7, come on, why are you not picking something new? Well, that's because this is probably one of my favorite Pokemon in the 7th generation, and most of that is because of how it's been changed. I believe it was 10 or 20 points that were added to the special attack. As you can see, it's now 95, which isn't the best, but I'll get to that. But 20 points in base stat to the special attack, or maybe it was 10 points to defense or HP or something. Essentially, its base stats got buffed, and it was in a way that really, that Pelipper really appreciates. It also got access to Hurricane, and which is great too, but the biggest thing is that it got Drizzle. And with Drizzle, just like Politoed or Kyogre, it allows Pelipper to start the rain on entry, or on switching as it says. It summons Rain Dance. So for 5 turns, Rain is active, and of course with that you get the buff and water attacks, the never missing Hurricanes and Thunders. And so a lot of really cool stuff you can start doing with that. And the cool thing is Pelipper is a water flying type, so obviously not the best against those Thunders or just electric types in general. But it's got decent bulk, as you can see. 60 HP is not the best, but it's decent. Defense is pretty good, so it can eat those hits. It's got access to Roost, of course, and Drizzle's really nice. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So it has a lot of things that it can work with, and it obviously doesn't have the best overall base stats in the spread and everything, but you can run it. The primary way I've run it, at least, is physical wall, and you give it leftovers, Drizzle, obviously, and then you give it Scald and Hurricane for offensive stab, and so you can still hit decently with a Scald. You could potentially get that Scald burn. Hurricane, of course, you have that chance to confuse, but it also just does so much with that stab, boost or special attack, increase, from Pelipper. It just does so much, and so I really like running those two, as most people do. And then you got Roost for recovery and U-turn. The nice thing about U-turn that most people don't realize is, well, not most people, but some people may not realize that the nice thing about having a pivot also be a weather starter is that you can drop in Pelipper on switch-in, or start with it as a lead, or something like that, and it immediately starts the weather before entry hazards and everything. But let's say you come in to take a hit, start up the rain, and then you're ready to switch out because you can't do anything else. Well, the way speed priority and switch priority works, U-turn is really helpful for Pelipper in this situation, because not only do you have the ability to still switch out, you can kind of scout what they're going to bring in first. So Pelipper's not the fastest, so already slow pivots on a slow tanky pivot is good, because you usually force them to have to switch first, and then you can switch into something that's an answer to whatever they switch into. But also, if they decide to hard switch out, as opposed to use something like a pivot move like U-turn or parting shot or volt switch or something like that, they're faster, they're not only going to switch out, but they're going to have to switch all the way back in, and then you get to use U-turn on that Pokemon that switched in, and then bring in something that can deal with it. So I really like Pelipper. I honestly think it's one of the best Pokemon in Gen 7, but it's still early, so the tiers and stuff in Smogon haven't been fully settled and all saturated and stuff, but I really think it's really strong in general, and the fact that it starts rain now. Politoed was such a pain in Gen 5, and it had its moments in Gen 7 or Gen 6. So having something that's not only a flying type now, so you have your ground immunity, but you also have access to Hurricane on it, and you have U-turn, that's enough for it to be crazy. So really good as far as a bulky wall goes. Another way that I've seen people run it that I think would be useful to run as well is the offensive rain set. Now, I've seen that people can run max speed, max special attack, modest nature, or max HP, max special attack, modest nature with a choice specs, and run Scald and Hurricane like before, U-turn for pivoting, and then Blizzard just for more coverage. And you can really hit hard with this thing with modest specs. It just, and then, you know, of course having Drizzle to guarantee that Hurricane hitting, and then Scald gets boosted in the rain, of course. So it just hits so hard, it really does, and it's honestly terrifying to try and switch almost anything in on it. It's a pain in the butt to deal with. So really nothing else to say there. The last main or common set that I've seen and used is the Damp Rock Rain Setter set. So it's usually a lead, and you start with it, and you have something that combos with the rain, like a Swift Swimmer, or something that just appreciates the fire nerf in the rain. And so you still carry Scald and Hurricane most of the times. You have U-turn and Roost. You could also use Defog, as we'll show in a minute. But as you can see, I still max out in HP. I'd try to get it to outspeed things like T-Tar and Celesteela and some of those other common bulky threats that Pelipper can't really deal with, so you can still U-turn out on them and set up the rain without getting hurt. So you'd outspeed them unless, of course, they're scarfed or something. So switching out, and you still have some decent bulk. Nothing great, obviously. It's still just a setup mon, but you're able to preserve it a lot better this way if you give it that speed, and people don't usually expect it. So that's nice. Now, as far as the draft goes, I think most people will be running Scald and Hurricane and maybe U-turn on it most weeks. It's pretty linear as far as what you really want to use it for, especially if you're going to use it offensively. But it's so good at what it does, it's really like, why wouldn't you? It is susceptible to things like Hidden Power Electric from Pokemon, like you wouldn't expect to have, like maybe Roserade or Nidoking, or just something that has Hidden Power Electric that can hit hard on the special side, because as you can see, Pelipper's special defense is not that great at all. You know, and then having that quad weakness to electric, it can really cause problems for it. I think that's kind of its bane, but I think it's pretty easily covered if you draft right or if you build your team right, so on and so forth. But let's take a look at some additional moves that you could run on it, and this could go for doubles in some senses, and it could go for singles as well. So for doubles, Tailwind is probably better in doubles than it is in singles, but you can still run Tailwind and maybe U-turn as well as setting up with Drizzle. So, you know, let's say you lead with Pelipper, you set up the Tailwind and then U-turn out. You can do that. You can obviously use Tailwind in doubles to where you can set up the rain and Tailwind in turn one, which is pretty crazy. And then being able to have something that benefits from that speed boost and the water buff. I've seen people use a Rockwanid and Pelipper together, and then that's pretty crazy because of the water bubble buff, and then having it really fast is also really nice. The only other thing I will say is that I think a Rockwanid gets entrainment, so you can make Pelipper do a lot more with Scald as well, which is pretty nuts. So that's some stuff to consider. Knockoff, again, it's always worth considering to have a Pokemon with knockoff, because especially in this newer generation, knockoff is a lot more sparse. So only in Pokebank tiers you'll really be able to make use of it. But knockoff is really something important to know about in the draft format. You know, knockoff can make a big difference in games. So if you're ready for Pelipper to like faint in your match against one of the other teams, and they don't think you have knockoff, obviously, I mean, no, it's not traditional that somebody would bring a Pelipper, much less use knockoff on a Pelipper. So you use knockoff to get rid of an item before letting your Pelipper go down, and it completely changes the match, because maybe it was a choice Scarfer or another choice attacker or a Life Orb, something that really needed that stat buff in order to be effective against your team. Now it can't. Knockoff's still one of the best moves, and the fact that Pelipper has access to it is really worth noting. Obviously Toxic is good on any tank, so having a Roost in Toxic and maybe Protect as well can be helpful to have either in doubles or singles. Defog is good. You can only get that through the Pokebank, so Gen 6 I believe. You cannot get it in Gen 7 games, like so Sun and Moon basically. You'd have to use an older Pelipper. But Defog, pretty nice I'd say, because hazard removal is always important. So another good thing to consider. Some other moves, like I said, Protect, probably more useful in doubles than in singles. Surf, kind of the same way, but it's helpful with that rain buff to have something that can hit hard and hit multiple enemies. So that's why I think it's really helpful as far as doubles go. Imagine pairing it with a Rangaroo or the Entrainment Araquanid, as I was talking about before. Could really put out a lot of damage without even being choice specs. So Fling is, I put it on here and I just thought it might be an interesting choice, because not only does it, vary in power, but it varies in effect when you use like, Toxic Orb or something, whatever it is, you can use Fling with very specific choices and items and situations on Pokemon that you normally wouldn't be able to like paralyze or poison or something, because or flinch even. So, like with King's Rock, you fling a King's Rock, it flinches the Pokemon. So whatever the case may be, having Fling is a decent option. Like I said, Knockoff is definitely a really strong move. Fling is very niche, but I feel like it's something that's worth noting. Pelipper gets a lot of crazy moves. I almost thought about putting Gunk Shot on here, but it just doesn't have a very good attack in order to like make use of it, so I didn't put it on here. Now this is again something that's probably more geared towards doubles, but it could be useful for doubles and singles, is Icy Wind. And that's because being able to slow your enemies and be able to do that to both in doubles can be really, really pivotal. And then also having Tailwind as another option as far as manipulating speed goes is really great. So Pelipper is not only good, in my opinion, in singles, but in doubles as well. And because of its move pool and its weather starting capabilities. So the last set of moves that I thought I'd put out, and I'd also wanted to say, Red Card could be kind of a helpful thing to disrupt, opponents in singles mainly, I would say. And so, I've thought about putting it on things like Pelipper before, so it might be worth considering, especially in the draft format where they might switch in on something or attack you with something that they would think would knock you out, and then they're triggered by the red card, and then you get to pivot out and get free momentum. So that's nice. So as far as the last moves go, I would say Soak is a nice thing to have, especially paired with Toxic, because then you get to, poison those traditionally steel or poison types that you can't normally poison, so that's like really helpful. And so, and then you also have the option to, combo that in doubles with something that hits water types hard. The only problem you have with that is that Pelipper's weak to electric types, so there's that. Stockpile is always worth noticing as well, because, since Pelipper gets that, it can bulk up on the defensive and especially defensive side, and that can get pretty scary considering it also can hit pretty hard too. So that's worth noticing. Whirlpool is good for trapping enemies. It's a little bit stronger with rain being triggered. And then using like Toxic as well, like, where there's Toxic Infestation on some Pokemon, Toxic Whirlpool does the same thing. So that's nice that you can also do that. And then the last thing is a double specific move is anything that has like quick guard or wide guard or something like that is always, again, worth noting. And as these are other options, wide guard is really helpful. It stops those earthquakes and surfs and discharges and all those other things, and it protects your Pokemon only, and it does not protect their Pokemon. So it's nice to have that type of tech. So I think Pelipper overall has a pretty decent move pool. It's still fairly predictable for what people probably use it for, but it can definitely like spread its spread its wings, as one might say. But it's definitely something that can bring surprises, you know, like Gug Shot, for example, even though I didn't list that. So anyways, I do want to talk about some Pokemon that you could pair with it before we grade it and end it. So Pelipper, yeah, you know, you could run 2 Pelippers if you want. Gastrodon is actually a pretty good option, because even though it's got that weakness to grass, and Pelipper takes neutral grass hits, it's got an immunity to water and to electric, so it covers that big weakness. It resists the rock weakness that Pelipper has. It's good in that way, and it's also, you know, let's say they switch in a water type that hits really hard and maybe has a dual typing with something that is advantageous against Pelipper. You switch into Gastrodon and you take that water hit, and now you have a boosted special attack, and you're you know, again, it's another bulky Pokemon, so maybe you're running physically defensive Pelipper and specially defensive Gastrodon. It gets that boost, it gets up to like mid 300s, and now you can start hitting with Scalds and Earth Powers and stuff like that. Or you could just go with the toxic route, of course, but still, like, it's nice to have. Gastrodon, despite the fact that it's usually lower tier, is actually a really good Pokemon to combo with Pelipper, in my opinion. Another option is Marowak, because it has that Lightning Rod ability. I would probably run it with that. The only problem that you run into with Marowak being comboed with Pelipper is that it is weak to water, and water being boosted causes problems for Marowak, and since it's slow, it doesn't have that sweeping potential, and it, you know, obviously its Fire Stab being nerfed in rain as well causes problems for it. But having that immunity and being able to hit hard with its common moves like Shadow Bone, a fighting move, a ground move like Boomerang or Earthquake, it can still do a lot of work and cover a weakness for you, and Marowak is still really strong despite that counterintuitive choice of rain with Marowak. And then of course a Swift Swimmer. I picked Kingdra because it's so good. You know, you don't even really need to invest fully in special defense or in speed in order to get the most out of its Swift Swim boosts. Really, you don't even have to. You could run just like this with modest Life Orb or something and throw out Dracos, Scalds, Ice Beams, or Blizzards. You know, honestly anything, and it outspeeds everything nearly with like a spread close to this. Now this isn't accurate, obviously, but it's just nice to have like that advantage. And again, with Pelipper having that ability to pivot, for you to pivot on something that they switch into and being able to bring in a Kingdra that outspeeds everything immediately, that's big. And so having something that can really manipulate people's like initiative and put the pressure on them and keep the pressure on them like you could with something like Kingdra with a Life Orb or Choice Specs, it just throws out so much damage. So, you know, that's really nice to have. Now, some other ones that I said was Ferrothorn, because again, it resists some of those common weaknesses, and the rain covers Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn's a major weakness to fire, so it's a really good wall to combo with Pelipper. I would normally just run it as a mixed wall with an investment mainly in special defense, and then an impish nature, and just run something like this. I mean, you could run this too. It's just nice to be able to kind of take both hits. It still eats most specially defensive hits pretty well, and then Pelipper obviously eats most of the physical hits anyways. And Pelipper, of course, resists the fighting type weakness that needs to be covered for Ferrothorn. So some good comboing there as far as types go. And you can set up hazards, paralyze things, and not thunder. Wait, can it really learn thunder? Wow. Okay, I learn something every day. Not that I would run that, but Thunder Wave, Leech Seed, Gyro Ball, stuff like that, you know, being able to wear down your enemy, stuff like that. And then having another option for electric immunities. And the nice thing about this is not only do you have that electric immunity and Volt Absorb, You can run choice specs. Assault vest is something I like to run. Life orb, and then you get to take advantage of the thunder because it's 100% hitting with, you know, rain up. So you switch into something like this, and then you throw out a powerful thunder with choice specs or life orb. Let's say you're running even timid nature, it still hits really hard, but let's say you have the opportunity to outspeed most of your opponent's draft lineup and go modest, like I was able to do a lot last season. So then you get to throw out even more damage with the rain up and stuff, being able to toss out thunders, or maybe you just go for Volt Switch or Shadow Ball or whatever, and you can really do a lot of damage. So Pelipper has a lot of ability to like combo and benefit other Pokemon as well. And I think for those two reasons, I'm going to give Pelipper an A, because like I said, Pelipper does have, I think it falls just short of the A+, because it is slightly too predictable, because even though it has those options, I think most people will often bring the same 2 or 3 moves and then something extra, or maybe the same exact set each, because I mean it is really good and you're going to use it probably for the same thing over and over, and if you pair it with something good, there's no real reason that you have to run it any differently. But I will say that even though it is really good and it's going to do things really well, and I'm really excited to hopefully use it at some point, I will say that it is not the best of the best because of the reason that it's it's more predictable, I will say. But that's it, guys. Thank you for watching. If you guys have any other sets or ideas or combos or anything like that regarding Pelipper and how it may synergize with other things, leave a comment below telling me. And if you guys liked the video, leave a like and subscribe if you're new and you like this kind of stuff. If you didn't like it, then dislike it. Either way, guys, thank you for watching. I will see you all next time.